You're listening to Ask Holly Hall. This is Holly Hall from AskHollyHall.com. Today we will be talking about anything from astrology, predictions, clairvoyancy. I am a master astrologer of a background education in philosophy and psychology, neurolinguistic programming, past life regression, and I'm also clairvoyant. Sit back and relax and enjoy the episode. Here are 5 health issues that can be detected while looking at your astrological birth chart. It's very important to understand that I'm not a medical professional in any way, so please do your own due diligence. Number 1, thyroid. If you know the time of your birth, then you would first look at the second house and see if there are any planets in that second house that also have a challenging aspect, such as a square or an opposition to any other planet except for Jupiter. Any negative or positive aspect to Jupiter is never a challenge. The second thing is you want to take a look at Taurus in your chart. If you've got Taurus in the second house with some of those planets, as well as Taurus in the 6th house of health, and maybe at times in the 12th house, you will also be looking at thyroid issues. Also, if you have many planets in Taurus, or even just one predominant planet in Taurus, such as the moon. 2, ADD and ADHD. ADD and ADHD, whether it's child or an adult, can be found in the 1st house, the 3rd house, and the 9th house from my experience as a master astrologer. I see that when there are a predominant amount of planets, specifically Mars or Mercury, in those houses, there's a tendency for ADD and ADHD. Now, let me please clarify. The downloads that I've received from Source is that the terminology and the diagnosis of ADD and ADHD is 95% misdiagnosed. There are definitely serious cases of ADD and ADHD. What I've received is that there are 2 reasons for the misdiagnosis, 2 major reasons, and then of course many reasons under the umbrella of these 2. One is our agricultural and our produce, aka food, literally laden with poison, inside and out. So if you do have ADD or ADHD, and you can fact check this with a lot of nutritionists, is that you want to stay away from chemicals, any kind of chemicals in food, inside and outside of the food. Outside, as I mean, is pesticides. The second one is our matrix, our system, specifically starting in the educational system. Now, I am not against the educational system whatsoever, but most of my clients who have children that have been diagnosed or they believe they have ADD or ADHD end up going into alternative school choices because they want smaller classes and they want their children to be able to self-monitor or self-regulate their own education. And this is what works with these multi-talented, multifaceted, multi-curious, multi-amazing children, is that they don't fit into the square box of boundaries at the educational system. Now, fortunately, and this is a one-up for Western society, we do allow alternative educations when diagnosed. I'm doing air quotes now. We do allow for accommodations for our children. I don't see why it has to get to that point, but hey. And the children have many, many choices of topics that they can take in school, specifically ones in high school. In Eastern societies and European, academic education is highly regarded, and they want all of their children to have the highest diploma, certified education possible. So I believe it might be harder on them. However, there's a lot of community based in those countries as well. So this may be helpful for them. Either way, If you have a child that has also a lot of Gemini and a lot of Sagittarius and a lot of Aquarius, if there's a Uranus is conjunct, square, or opposite Mercury, Mars, sometimes Venus, Moon, Sun, you're going to see this multi-talented, multi-curious, fidgety child who can't sit still. I mean, I don't know any child who can actually should be forced to sit still with all the energy that we have no along these types of children. They're highly educated within themselves. They're constantly curious and asking questions, and they're usually highly intellectual. They're thinkers, heavy thinkers, overthinking. Okay. Third health issue I can find in an astrological chart. Adrenal fatigue. That can often lead to headaches as well. So let's look at a combination of two. This is a predominant amount of planets that are afflicted by aspects in the first house, the personal planets specifically. If it is the outside planets, which is from Jupiter to Pluto, then if they are in the first house and they've got a challenging aspect to a personal planet in another house, this can also cause adrenal fatigue. Often I see it within the planet of, if you have a predominant amount of planets in Aries and Pisces. Now I do sidereal true astrology, which is close to Vedic astrology. So I will see this in a Vedic, a sidereal chart, but not see it in a Western chart. However, the planetary placements remain the same. It's the zodiac signs that will change in the constellations. Nevertheless, when there's a lot of Pisces and Aries, what I see is that they burn the candles at both ends, and this creates adrenal fatigue. They also tend to have an addiction and this is not just Aries or Pisces, but also if there's a lot in the first house, a lot of Mars affliction or some planets in Aries, any personal planet in Aries, specifically if there's an affliction to Uranus and sometimes Saturn. A lot of fire in the chart. And what will happen is they have a tendency to be attracted to sugary foods and carbs because it reacts or triggers their adrenals to create more adrenaline. So they have artificial energy. You see, our adrenals that give us adrenaline is supposed to be a reservoir for energy when the rest of our body doesn't have it. Specifically, if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger and you need that extra energy to get the hell out of there. Now, in this day and age, we are triggered constantly, this flight or fight. So this definitely makes it challenging. And even though these people are looking for this artificial energy, instead of resting and recharging their batteries, they start to put a lot of wear and tear on their adrenals. This can also cause headaches. The high sugar and high carb intake. And sometimes if they're very strong in all of these aspects that I had mentioned, they have a tendency to go a long time without eating and then binge. They tend to be bingers around that. And this can definitely accelerate or exhaust the adrenals. Okay. Number 4. Blood sugar. When I see also Aries, first house, fifth house, and a lot of Leo in the chart, there is a tendency first on a dietary level to have a very strong attraction, cravings for sugar, specifically artificial sugars that hit the bloodstream very quickly. I always recommend with clients like this to have a sugary shake in the morning, but not real sugar. Fruit sugar, and not necessarily fruit juices, because that's a lot of sugar in your system very fast. But also not just pure fruit. have it mixed with coconut milk, almond milk, water, ice, hemp seed for protein, or if you have a protein mix that you would like to have. So that basically it's like 1/4 fruit and the rest of it is other substance, because too much fruit in your system that you're not chewing could also be detrimental. Again, I'm not a healthcare professional. Please do your own due diligence. So when I see a lot of first house, fifth house, a lot of Leo, almost always when I see Mars in Leo, I'll say you've got to be careful with blood sugar, anything to do with the blood. So blood pressure, blood sugar, and almost always I'll go like, yeah, diabetes runs in my family. Or I've just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and now I've got to take these pills or watch my diet. Now, one of the things that I recommend, this is only through my own research, and I literally just said this to a client not too long ago, is you want to take a look at testing your own blood sugar if you have this and see what foods, if you tend to eat a lot of unnatural foods, what foods spike up your blood sugar, and how long does it take for your blood sugar to regulate after that? That's the key, is how long it takes to regulate. So if I eat a giant bowl of grapes, which is high in sugar fruit, my blood sugar will go up high. But if it can regulate within 40 minutes, which is about its digestion time, I should be good. Now, because blood sugar spikes up and down drastically throughout the day, sometimes blood tests with a doctor at that time is not the best. And they always want you to fast, and then they give you a glucose type of, especially if they're doing the deep testing. But anyways, do your own due diligence around that. And finally, number 5. Inflammatory illnesses such as fibromyalgia, sometimes autoimmune disorders, that's actually an autoimmune disorders, and sensitivity to supplements, drugs, and over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs. This is when you've got a predominant amount of planets in the 12th house, in Pisces, and in Scorpio, as well as sometimes in the sign of Cancer. We're also looking at you know what? I'm going to add 2 more bonuses for this series as well. We're going to look at digestive issues and dairy intolerance. Those will be the next 2. People with a lot of Pisces, Scorpio in their chart are very sensitive to drugs, over-the-counter drugs. Microdosing can help. If your doctor understands your sensitivity, they will low dose you and have your dose go up slowly. Also, they're very sensitive to painkillers and sensitive to a lot of supplements that may cause drowsiness. They tend to need a little bit more water than what their weight need. Their weight may say, oh, you need, I don't know, 72 ounces of water. I'm not sure what the math is for certain weights, but you may need an extra glass of water because of the water retention that can happen. Now, this is again Pisces, a lot of planets strong in Pisces, Neptune close to your inner planets, which goes from the Sun to Mars. Also, Scorpio, possibly Pluto close to an inner planet. And it just means that you get a lot of sponginess in your body. And if you've got weight gain, which many of these people have weight gain, a lot of it's water retention and a lot of it's inflammation. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, these people can't really get away with eating toxins, because that is also a chemical, and these chemicals make their body extremely inflammatory, and that's where this puffiness comes from in their body, which can lead to a lot of autoimmune disorders. Again, I'm not a medical professional. Do your own due diligence. Stomach issues, which is also related to dairy intolerance. Anybody with Cancer in their chart, the zodiac sign of Cancer, in the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, as soon as I see 1 or 2 planets or more in the zodiac sign of Cancer, I'll tell them you have intolerance for dairy. If you've got any autoimmune disorders, any arthritis, inflammation, stomach issues, any kind of fibromyalgia, unwanted pain, unwanted weight gain, specifically in the stomach area, it's because of dairy. And everyone will say to me, oh, I only have a little bit with my coffee, or I might eat it maybe once in a while. I'm like, oh, what about pizza? What about your potato chips, since all potato chips have dairy in it except for plain chips? Oh, I didn't know that. Right? So you have to look at the ingredients. If there's whey, casein, dairy, milk powder, it's all dairy. It comes from a cow. No, eggs aren't dairy. They don't come from a cow. Now, some people also cannot even tolerate other animal milk. And you have to cut it out for 6 weeks in order to see a difference. It has to be 100% for 6 weeks. If you slip up like 3 weeks into the 6 weeks and you accidentally have a little piece of chocolate that might have dairy in it, you got to start 6 weeks again. The reason is, and you can look this up as well, this is documented, that and peer reviewed, that it takes 6 weeks for your body to eliminate or to get rid of the inflammation in the body that this dairy has caused. Now, some people, please don't misinterpret this for gluten and sugar, because gluten and sugar with a lot of people can cause these same inflammatory issues. But dairy will take 6 weeks. You can even look it up. They've done a small peer review and study with people in the arthritis association.org, and notice that dairy will accelerate the inflammation and the pain of arthritis. Now, the moon, if it's afflicted, can also be the same with dairy intolerance. But mostly I see it in the fourth house, a lot of fourth house stuff. But mostly I see it with the sign of Cancer or an affliction to the moon, like a moon-Saturn connection. For instance, I got moon conjunct Saturn. It's in Capricorn, so that's interesting. Often I will see a dairy intolerance in Capricorn, specifically if there's an opposition or a conjunction, which I have. And I discovered by accident that dairy was a problem for my arthritis. And I had arthritis when I was a kid. And I was fed not my mother's milk from very young, from birth. So now different parts of the world, because of the growth hormones that they put in American and Canadian cows, will also not affect as drastically. The dairy will not affect people as drastically. Okay, so there you go for dairy. And then digestive issues. So that means IBS, constipation, difficulty eliminating on like at least once a day. The health organization will say 3 times a week or less is constipation. But really, if you're eating healthy, it should be 3 times a day. But once a day is awesome. So that is usually people who've got a lot of planets in the 6th house, that they have a lot of planets in Virgo and Scorpio. Virgo is the small intestines. Scorpio is the larger intestines, aka bowels. And many who have Scorpio and Virgo all say you've got issues with IBS, diarrhea, constipation. They'll be like, oh my gosh, yeah. Now, Scorpio also rules the female reproductive system and the male reproductive system. So this can be attributed to some problems there as well. So when I see 6th house, a lot of Virgo, a lot of Scorpio, specifically Virgo, these people have very sensitive to eating foods that are difficult to digest. So if you're having beans, you got to soak them, and maybe lentils, which are much more easier to digest. And needing prunes or prune juice on a daily basis. Prunes is better because it's the soluble fiber, not just the squeezed out from prunes. So prunes are better to use. Most people will say, well, I'm taking all these vitamins, I'm taking vitamin B's, and I'm not feeling any different, any better. Well, that's because it is our small intestines that absorb, sometimes it's our stomach as well, but it absorbs the nutrients that go through the intestinal walls in order to distribute it to your body. It's one of the ways. And if it's all clogged up like a bad pipe in your house, then it's not able to absorb the nutrients. So I always suggest that people start off with sublingual vitamins under the tongue, liquids, vitamin B12 liquids, vitamin B12 pills, or B6, as well as D's and C's and whatnot that can go sublingually under the tongue. So it goes straight into your bloodstream that way. Okay, so these are now 7 of some of the most common health issues that people have that is detectable through an astrological chart. Namaste.